Okay, welcome everyone. We will call our regular meeting of council to order and recognize that we're holding our meeting on the unceded traditional territories of the Hoopachesit and Sashot First Nations. Are there any late items to add to the agenda from councillors? And any late items from the city clerk?
Yes, Madam Mayor. Two pieces of correspondence, one from Susan Roth and another from Roland Smith as it relates to the Mclean mill. And then item M1 under new business, consideration of a resolution to AVICC.
Thank you. Would somebody like to move approval of the agenda as amended? Is there a seconder? Any discussion? All in favor? Carried. And we have minutes from the special meeting held at 10:30 a.m. and the regular meeting of council held at 2 p.m. on January 13th, 2020. Somebody like to move adoption of the minutes?
So moved, Madam Mayor. Second, Madam Mayor.
Any comments or questions on the minutes? Seeing none, all in favor? Carried. That brings us to public input period, which is an opportunity for members of the public to address council on topics of relevance to City Council. A maximum of 4 speakers for 3 minutes each will be accommodated. Would anybody like to speak to council? Nobody? One last opportunity. All right. We have no delegations today. So we'll move on to unfinished business. And the first item is a report from the city clerk regarding a notice of motion to create a select committee to review bylaws. City clerk, would you like to speak to this?
Yes, Madam Mayor. Sorry, apologize for all that. Now I'm getting caught
That's okay. I think everybody's ready.
So this report speaks to a notice of motion that was put forward by Councillor Corbeil. Our city clerk prepared the response, and I'll just read a couple of notes. Staff recognize and share council's frustration with bylaws that require updating, and staff are committed to a process to address them. With additional staff now in their roles in the clerks and the bylaw departments, we are better placed to focus on a review of the city's bylaws and have already begun to do so. So essentially, the report suggests a shirt sleeve meeting with members of council to sit with staff to review and discuss council's priorities as they relate to the city's bylaws, and then moving forward from there.
Okay. Councillor Corbeil, do you have any questions or comments first?
Well, first of all, the reason behind the motion was there appears to be a lack of a sense of urgency, and these empty lots have been around literally for decades, certainly for several councils, and I'm old enough to remember when most of those vacant lots had thriving businesses in them. I have no problem if staff is going to pick up the ball, but we had a discussion about vacant properties, and we determined we needed to develop a bit of a strategic plan, and there's a number of moving pieces here. We have to develop an inventory, which should be something that could be done very, very easily. We need to look at bylaws that actually apply a penalty to people that do not keep their properties in decent shape, and at the same time we have to give the carrot. If somebody wants to develop some of these empty properties, that we can, as best we can, fast track the process. So I don't disagree with that sort of roll up your sleeves and let's have a talk. But again, I want to emphasize sometimes there just appears to not be a sense of urgency, and I want to see, to start working on a strategic plan and get it done quickly. So that's kind of my rationale behind the resolution, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. And I think that what I heard when I discussed this with the city clerk was largely the feeling that that bylaws are what council largely has the authority to direct and create, and the feeling that all of council should be involved in that process. So I think the recommendation to have a working group of all of council where we all get a chance to sit down, talk about what our priorities are and where we might feel that they're not, being actioned as quickly as we would like to, or where we would like to change direction in terms of priorities, that the thought was that should be a discussion that all of us get to have together. So I think, in my opinion, the recommendation kind of gets us to where you want to go, and possibly in a different way. If we pass this today and have that session and don't feel satisfied, we could always come back to the select group or select committee as an opportunity and reconsider if we want to move forward with that. I think you've raised some very valid concerns, and at the end of the day, we see a lot of bylaw issues as concerns in our community, and just want to be able to have some control over what the priorities are. So, are there any other thoughts, Councillor Eckert?
A couple of questions. One of the options is that council directs staff to establish a meeting to prioritize and review and update the city's bylaws. So I assume that was all the city's bylaws, where Councillor Corbeil referred to just bylaws to vacant lots. So I'm a little confused what we're trying to do here.
CEO?
Can I get some clarification?
Madam Mayor, Council, vacant lots is clearly a strategic initiative priority for Councillor Corbeil. Staff have not heard that it's the strategic bylaw item for council. So at a roll up your sleeves session with council, we would like to hear from council what are the issues in the community that you would like city resources to be applied against, to change, and if vacant lots is one of those, then that'll be a priority. So staff needs to know what your priorities are so that we can prioritize, and also there might be other tools. So rather than focus straight into the bylaw, if council tells staff what are the issues that the community is being faced with, and what are some of the potential solutions, they might not just be bylaw enforcement. They might be incentives or different things too.
Okay. Another question is, our bylaw manager here full-time now, or is she still kind of working part-time and back and forth? Because it might be a good idea to wait till she gets on board full-time if we're going to review all the city's bylaws.
So, yeah.
Question?
Thank you, Councillor Haggard, for that. Yes, we have not yet filled the manager of police support services. So our manager of community safety, I believe is the title, is doing two jobs right now. So she's at City Hall about 3 days a week, and at the RCMP 2 days a week, and supporting two different work groups. And but at the same time, we know that there's been a vacuum in that position for too long. And we know that council is anxious to get moving, so we think that we're ready to at least have the engagement with council, and then we'll be as clear with you as we can around what the capacity is to take on how many items at once. And if I can also, while we're here on this topic, what we'd like to see is, rather than starting with enforcement of an existing bylaw, we'd like to, if we're going to move in a certain bylaw direction, especially given that the community hasn't been used to bylaw enforcement prior to a couple of years ago, we'd like to start with first revisiting a specific bylaw that is a priority, bring it to council if any edits or additions or updates are required. That in itself will be a public engagement process. And then with a refreshed bylaw that we know is more cleanly enforceable, then we can go through a public education campaign, and only at the end of that would we propose enforcement, rather than it appears sometimes to the public, this isn't the case, but it appears that we start with enforcement, and as we know, that doesn't always go over well. So we want to support the community and support our bylaw staff by taking those other steps first.
Okay. I've got Councillor Solda and Councillor Washington, and then Councillor Corbeil, I think, and I just wanted to comment that vacant lots are a key initiative in council's strategic plan. So I think there's a handful of bylaw-related items in our strategic plan, and vacant lots is one of them. But I do think it's valid process for us to all have the opportunity to even look through our strategic plan again and talk about our areas of focus. Councillor Solda.
Well, it's not just vacant lots, it's vacant buildings. We've talked about that too, and what to do with them and how they look. I know it's been talked about for many, many years, and it's time to move forward instead of sitting on it. We got some really old bylaws, and in the past we have been, we changed the bylaws as they come forward to council, and yeah, and maybe we need to update them. But I agree with Councillor Haggard regarding the bylaw manager. I would like to see the bylaw manager get in place and have some times to take a look through our bylaws and recommendations coming back to council, and that she needs time to take a look at what we have and move from there. But I definitely think one of the priorities should be the vacant lots and buildings at the moment. Thank you,
Okay,
Madam Mayor.
So we'll certainly have this conversation when we have that session if this motion passes. Councillor Washington?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Not meaning to put the CEO on the spot. How many bylaws do we have, would you estimate?
You have put me on the spot, and I do not know.
I'm just thinking if we're starting with the bylaw thing, we should probably do it right and just go in and start from A and go to Z and get rid of some of the bylaws that probably don't even pertain to anything anymore and get them off the books, because if it has something to do with your horse and your buggy, I think it's not required anymore. So I'm sure there's other communities out there that have gone in and cleaned up their bylaws and got rid of, hundreds of them, and I think it's time for us to do the same.
Thank you. Okay. Councillor Poon, would you like to read the motion that's there? Oh, sorry, Councillor Corbeil, did you have another comment first?
Well, the only other thing I would add, and it's something that has to be done at some point anyways, and I don't know who would do it, probably bylaw officers, but it shouldn't be an overly onerous task to start to develop an inventory of empty lots. I mean, you can practically do it with Google Earth from your living room, but I would love to know what's out there. I mean, just very quickly, I came up with probably 20 empty lots on main thoroughfares. So before we get to the next step, I would like to see a list of all the vacant properties, as Councillor Soltis says, not only empty lots, but empty buildings as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Poon.
So do you want me to add that to the motion then?
I don't think that specifically needs to be
Okay.
added to the motion. I
Yeah.
think we can address that as a part of this process.
Sure. So I'll move that council direct staff to establish a meeting to prioritize a review and update of the city's bylaws.
Okay, any further comments? Councillor Haggard.
I'm in support of the motion, but I'm not in support of it this time till our bylaw manager becomes in place and full-time in order to work on this project with council.
Okay, thank you.
Is there any way we could table the motion until that happens, or?
I think that, so this is the recommended motion forward from staff. This is separate from what was originally asked from Councillor Corbeil. I think that if this is being brought forward to us by staff, then there's a capacity there at least to start the process. She may not be in place full time, but I think that staff wouldn't propose us starting this process if we didn't have someone with the capacity to handle it. So I think we can trust that she's got enough time to move forward. Okay, so on the motion, moved and seconded, all in favor? Carried, thank you. Okay, moving on to staff reports. Item 1, accounts. Councillor Washington.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I move that the certification of the Acting Director of Finance dated January 27, 2020 be received, and checks numbering 145,359 to 145,494 inclusive, and payments of accounts totaling $1,986,569.47 be approved.
Second, Madam Mayor.
Any questions? Okay, all in favor? Carried. And on to item 2. From the Director of Parks, Recreation and Heritage, we have the Mclean Mill Visitor Services Agreement. Attached, we do also have 2 items of correspondence. So we will hear from our Director of Parks, Recreation and Heritage, and then I think I'll get our City Clerk just to summarize the correspondence before we have further conversation.
Okay, thank you, Madam Mayor. Before Council considers the proposed agreement in front of you, I'd like to recap the Mclean Mill Visitor Services RFP process that staff undertook. So we did receive 3 proposals. It was an oversight that the 3 proposals and costs for each were not listed in the staff report. And of the three proposals, one proponent proposed to become an employee of the city. That proposal was not considered because it did not meet the terms of the RFP. A second proponent proposed an operating loss in 2020 of $241,475. And the third proponent, which is the Chamber of Commerce, proposed an operating subsidy of $160,000 in 2020 and was deemed by council to most closely meet the city's goals and demonstrate the ability to succeed. And so at that point, council directed that staff negotiate an operating agreement with the chamber with the best possible terms for the city, and that the agreement be brought forward to council for consideration, which is what's in front of you today. And just refreshing on the process, I'd be more than happy to prepare a report for council that outlines the process we undertook for the February 10th meeting that will provide some further clarity in writing for council.
Okay, thank you. Are there any questions on that first? Okay. City Clerk, would you be able to just summarize the two items of correspondence, just because they are related generally?
Certainly, Madam Mayor. So the one item from Mr. Smith was essentially just questioning why the city did not provide additional information regarding the RFP process, as we've done in past reports when an RFP has been issued. And the letter writer, Susan Roth, was highlighting, bringing to City Council's attention limitations from their perspective that the city may have when it comes to use of the property, and specifically because it's agricultural land reserve.
Thank you. Okay. Is council ready to ask questions or have debate, or would we like to get maybe a high-level overview of the agreement? Okay. I think for the public's perspective, if either the CAO or the Director of Parks, Recreation and Heritage could just provide some... I think that was a show of encouragement to go right ahead.
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. So in my staff report there on page 19, I've highlighted some of the background and key aspects of the draft operating agreement. So just on page 19 there, I refer to the, so just to be crystal clear with council, that this draft agreement is related to the non-historic zone of the Mclean Mill National Historic Site. So just for the public's benefit and council's refresher, that staff are now in complete control of all the historic assets, so working in our Parks, Recreation and Heritage Department regarding anything that has related to historic aspects or artifacts is in complete control of city staff at this time. And the non-historic zone, as defined in the agreement, includes three buildings, which is the Visitor Center, the gift shop, and the office, the courtyard, the parking lots, and the treed area bound by the courtyard, parking lots, train tracks, and historic zone. So that's what staff have referenced as the non-historic zone in the document. Another item of note is this 10% heritage fee. So in order to help bolster our opportunities in preservation of the historic site, 10% heritage fee would be applied to every transaction, and that would be collected by the operator. So in this case, the proposal is for the chamber to collect that, and then the chamber would provide that fee annually back to the city. Again, the city would use that heritage fee in assistance in preservation of the heritage site. And then the third item of note regarding key aspects of the agreement was that the duration of the proposed agreement is 3 years with the option for a further 3 years. So the idea behind a 3-year deal as opposed to a 1 year or a 10-year, that sort of thing, is to find some balance that we need to give an operator the opportunity to get some traction and have some success at that site. So it's staff's belief that any fewer than 3 years, any operator wouldn't be set up to succeed to do well at that site. Secondly, again, on the other side of that discussion around if it's the idea of strictly 3 years as opposed to, say, 5 or 10 years, it doesn't lock either party into a long-term plan or agreement that they also wouldn't be successful. So it gives both the city and the operator the opportunity at that 3-year mark to then reevaluate and determine, is this relationship working? Does it make sense to continue, etc.
Thank you. Are there questions from council? Councillor Corbill.
Well, in light of some of the letters we received and some of the recent activities, for example, the the airport and the ministry stepping in, and there was a situation down in the Noose Bay where there was a restaurant, the Rusty Rake, I believe it was called, and it was on agricultural land. I think it would be prudent for us to ensure that everything we're doing out there is kosher. I know about a year ago we voted and we didn't review it with the Agricultural Land Commission. I think we should do it this time if we're going to enter into a 3-year agreement to make sure what we're doing is allowed on those lands. And secondly, I don't see, and I may be mistaken, in this contract, if there is a clause where if some unforeseen thing came along, like all of a sudden the Agricultural Land Commission said, you know, thou shalt not do whatever, that we have the ability to get out. There is, the camping is highlighted, but I don't see anything else. So I guess it's two asks. One, to make sure in that contract that we have a clause that if something unforeseen happens, we're able to get out. And secondly, to ask the Agricultural Land Commission, are we doing what's allowed out there?
CAO, could you speak to the ALR or ALC?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. As Councillor Corbeil pointed out, last year Council considered that this issue and either directed to take no action or did not direct. I can't recall which. And subsequent to that discussion by Council, we learned that Mclean Mill Society had in fact reached out to Agricultural Land Commission in their role as operators at Mclean Mill and begun a conversation with the Commission. So after some resignations from the Society, I picked up the threads of that conversation and had a bit of a phone and email tag with the Commission. That then went dormant, and over recent weeks, I've reactivated that conversation. Finally made contact for the first time last week, had a brief conversation. I'd like to explore that conversation further and then be able to come back to Council and report, if that's all right.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Solda.
Madam Mayor, I agree with Councillor Corbeil. I think we need to put the horse before the cart and check with the ALR. There is nothing, I want to see it in writing from the ALR because I don't want, he said, she said, because it will come back on us. Because when you look at the interpretation of the policy L22 that was sent to us, no more than 150 people may be in attendance. There's a lot, people can read it. So I just want to make sure we're right on target because I don't want what happened with the airport to come back on us again. Also, I have a question regarding the non-historic zone. Is that ALR property too? It is. So again, I just want us to be right on target here, plus the campground that's there. I don't believe that's on ALR land. Is that correct, or?
Madam Mayor, to my knowledge, the entire site falls
Okay.
within the Agricultural Land Reserve.
So again, we're not doing what is required, and I just want to, before I can approve this and go forward on this, I will not vote for it until I see it from the ALR that we're right on target.
CAO, could you comment on the second half of Councillor Corbeil's question around, is there a clause or could we add a clause that allows us to, terminate the contract if there was an ALC, something that, stopped us from being able to reasonably conduct the business that we are there?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. As Councillor Corbeil pointed out, there's a provision in the draft agreement that speaks to the chamber operating the campsite, and there's a direct provision there that says if the city's prevented from use of that site by a third party, that we're held harmless. There's I believe it's a 12-month notice period. Either party can serve notice to terminate that agreement. There's a provision that says neither party will look to the other to underwrite their losses. If we were to take that further, this is my opinion, and put a rider in there that said if a third party blocked some current usage of the site, we would be asking the chamber to take a financial liability for that. And we could ask the chamber how they feel about that. I can imagine how they would. So if there's a financial liability, it's the city's, is my suggestion, Madam Mayor.
Okay. Thank you. Councillor Solda.
And also I have thing about when I read no more than 150 may be in attendance at any event must be less than 24 hours in duration, and it is on our original contract. A maximum of 10 events of any type are permitted within a calendar year on a farm, which is ALR. For example, 5 weddings, 2 music concerts, and 3 art shows. And there's a lot more to the whole thing on events that happen there. So I just, again, I'm going to stress, I would like to know what the ALR in writing, what they say, yay or nay. And according to our original contract, when we took over the property, there is that stipulation in there too. So we need to do a little more homework before we go forward.
Councillor Haggard.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. My question when I read through this was, number one, this used to be industrial land, so I don't understand how it went from industrial land to farmland. I thought part of it was ALR and I thought part of it wasn't. So I guess I'm wrong, but that's the assumption that I always had. And my second concern is there's other parcels of property in the Alberni Valley that are on ALR that have several events per year. They have campgrounds on it, but people writing these letters are people that live next to the Mclean Mill and have a long history of not being supportive of Mclean Mill. So if they're concerned about the ALR land, they should be going after everyone who is in this situation, not just Mclean Mill.
Thank you. Councillor Paulson.
The discussion here really is around the management of the site, and I think that we need to pursue the management of the site. There's a lot of time-sensitive stuff with regards to marketing and whatnot. The ALC stuff, I believe, is part of the process and the management process moving forward. If there's restrictions and covenants, they will have to abide by that. That's a third party. I'm more interested in the management of the site, having a gatekeeper that is taking admissions and so on. If we delay this, it's bureaucracy at its worst. I'm excited to move forward with the presentation and the motion as it is, and we can deal with ALC as we move forward.
Thank you. Councillor Poon.
Thank you. I agree with Councillor Paulson, and I think we should move forward on this today and, have some certainty as to what we're doing with the site.
Thank you. Councillor Washington.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I have a feeling this is probably about the last kick at the cat that Mclean Mill's going to get. I don't think our public is going to allow us to do anything more than this, but I agree with Councillor Paulson. We got to get going. We're going to miss the season if we start dragging our heels. So let's move forward, and I'm sure we'll the Agricultural Land Commission will be in contact with them.
Thank you. And I do just want to, to Councillor Solda and Councillor Corbeil and the concerns expressed, I just want to agree that I think there are some valid concerns that are being expressed here. And I certainly don't think that we should undermine the significance of that, especially seeing what has happened, with the example given around the restaurant on ALR land. I think that we do have to be looking to follow what is in the agreement. I think a lot of what the Chamber proposes is not in contradiction to that agreement. I would argue the bulk of what goes on at that site would be allowed at that site. So I don't think this is an example of something that is going to potentially, close down Mclean Mill, for instance. But it may just mean that some of the events that are held there, maybe some can't be held there, or maybe they have to be held in a different capacity or in a different way. And I think we should get clarity on those answers, but I don't think that there's anything that would stop, the spirit of the agreement from going forward and the type of work, for the most part, that the Chamber wants to do there. So I'm quite excited, and I personally, I think the time in the last few years that I've seen the community at large, people who have been very critical of Mclean Mill in the past, get excited about Mclean Mill again and get, see value to their young families to bring their kids out there on a regular basis over the last few years is was a couple of years ago when we were really focused on family events and you know, the potential for weddings and all of those types of events to happen there. And I think it started to become a space that our community could be really proud of. And that's through a lot of work over, you know, the last couple of decades through industrial heritage and everyone who's had a piece out there. But I think I saw a momentum building around again that probably hadn't in the past around young families to come back out there. So I'm excited to have a couple of the same people involved, and I'm hopeful that we will see a transformation of that space and the community coming back out to celebrate the aspects of our heritage that are there. Councillor Solda.
Yeah. Madam Mayor, I have a question for staff. And the CAO maybe could answer this. On the original contract on the mill title, the details and stuff like that, the title search, there is a restricted covenant on it. And I would like to know if we've looked into it on the restricted covenant, because it does say regarding the ALR and the restriction. So it says legal notations. The certificate of title may be affected by the ALR, and you're supposed to take a look at it from there. It was April 26, 1974. Have we looked at that or any of the covenants on it?
Madam Mayor, I'm not familiar with that document, and if Councillor Soldier would like to provide me that information or put me in touch with the person who's given her that information,
I think rather than, I would argue that it's not that our staff is not aware of it. I think our staff is aware of what's on title. It's difficult to pull something up when you're looking at it and our staff doesn't have it in front of them and try to ask a question on it. So I would prefer if we're going to ask specific questions about whether someone's familiar with a very specific written document or not, we should provide that to our staff ahead of time.
Okay.
Councillor Corbeil.
I just want to be clear, I have no problem with the chamber taking Mclean's mill over, and I wish them all the luck. My only point is that the contract is written, and this could be for both parties. There should be some way, if something unforeseen happens, that either the city could get out of it or the chamber could get out of it. And that's really all I'm asking for, is an addition, maybe the part on the campground or somewhere in the contract, a little escape clause that either party could exercise if something unforeseen happened.
Okay.
I agree.
CAO, do you have anything additional to add to that?
I can appreciate the sentiment behind that. An agreement like this usually has to have an extended notice period so that either party has the ability to disengage with employees and contractors and commitments that they have made. So in this case, the chamber would be retaining employees, would be taking bookings probably into the next year, that sort of thing. So it's not likely that you could turn off the tap or turn off the switch without notice, without some kind of upset. And that's why an agreement like this would have a notice period, in this case 12 months. The agreement with Mclean Mill Society had a 12-month notice period. With Industrial Heritage Society prior to that, it may have been 6 months. I think it might not have been a year, but it's common to have a notice period. If there was a short notice escape clause, then I think the other party, the chamber, would look at that as a financial liability for themselves that they would ask us to underwrite. So either way, we'd be exposed to the cost of that.
Okay. Any further questions or comments on this? Okay. Councillor Paulson, would you like to read that?
I'd like to move that Council for the City of Port Alberni authorize the Mayor and the City Clerk to execute the 3-year agreement between the City of Port Alberni and the Alberni Valley Chamber of Commerce to operate the non-historic zone of the Mclean Mill National Historic Site as outlined in Schedule A attached.
Thank you. Is there a seconder? And Councillor Solda.
Madam Mayor, I would like to know exactly for the public, for the dollar use, what we're going to be paying, and that I think the public needs to realize the cost, because we are contracting them, right? So
I think that was stated.
but there's a bunch of other things. When you start adding up the budget and you look at the line, I mean, we've talked about 150,000, right? And then you start going through the line on our budget, it works out, and it's not necessarily the Chamber of Commerce. It's just in total what we're going to be putting out, and I don't know if it belongs in this discussion or not. It works out to be about 600,000. So I just want to be clear, because we got the pond in there, and I know it's not to do with the Mclean, with the contractor. So I just want us to be really clear with the public, so.
Councillor Poon.
I thought our discussion was on the management of the site, not.
It is, and I would caution to throw out a number of 600,000 unless we know that that is the number. A lot of the pond project was funded in the last 2 years. There is not $600,000 of current year taxation going into Mclean Mill.
Madam Mayor, may I just inquire too that I don't have a problem with the $150,000 to the chamber at all, but then there's all these contingencies. There's I believe a $40,000 for 2019 if some things aren't paid. Then there's another fund for if events. So maybe a clarity for me to understand this. There's other little funds, 40,000 I think, for any events if they don't turn out in that.
Just one $40,000 contingency fund.
Correct, Madam Mayor. Just to clarify from my report, the value of subsidies the City of Port Alberni would be providing the Chamber of Commerce is $160,000.
Okay, fair enough.
And again, Madam Mayor, this is for the operation of the site. So the septic repairs have already been outlined in the draft 5-year financial plan. And Madam Mayor, as you alluded to as well, the one contingency fund there as well. Speaking to previous outstanding bills or bills payable from 2019 or earlier, as we have stepped away or terminated the agreement with the Mclean Mill Society, staff are currently tracking those costs and will be providing council with an updated report. Again, that is separate from this specific motion in this report, Madam Mayor, which is speaking strictly to the chamber being the operators of the non-historic site.
Thank you. And can I just verify that I believe it is 150?
Madam Mayor, if I can jump in, the proposal from the chamber was $160,000. Through negotiations, council directed staff to negotiate a lower cost. We were able to get the chamber to take on a number of maintenance duties on the historic site as well as the non-historic site, which resulted in the city being able to diminish what we were budgeting to do that work. So there was a significant reduction from the initial draft budget.
80,000.
And the chamber came down from 160 to 150. So their proposal was 160. We landed on 150, and the chamber's taking on a number of tasks that we don't have to pay to do ourselves.
Thank you. Okay, are there any further questions or comments? Okay, then on the motion, which is to approve the agreement, all in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. Councillor Paulson, would you also move receipt of items 2A and 2B? I forgot to do that.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'd like to move receipt of item F2A and F2B.
Thank you. Is there a seconder?
Second, Madam Mayor.
Okay, all in favor? Carried. Was that unopposed?
No, I have a comment.
Okay, go ahead.
Madam Mayor, I would still like to make a motion that we contact the ALR and find out the stipulations regarding the particular Mclean's Mill site.
Is there a seconder for that?
Well, I'll second it.
I would just, before we have conversation on this, argue that this is likely not necessary because we are already in discussion with the ALC specifically for that topic, as the CAO indicated. CAO, do you need a further motion?
Madam Mayor, although council directed not to do it, we are in fact in contact with the Agricultural Land Commission. If you pass a motion or not, I think the outcome's the same.
Okay.
We'll stay in touch and we'll report back to council.
Okay, thank you. Do you want to continue?
Yep, I would like it to be on the record, please.
Okay. We haven't moved and seconded. Further discussion? Okay. On the motion, all in favor? Opposed? Did you vote? Was that, I counted 3-3. Where did I miss a hand? All in favor? Okay, 4-3. Okay, carried. Okay, on to item 3 from the Director of Engineering and Public Works and Acting Director of Finance, an update regarding the wastewater treatment facility and an updated budget. Welcome.
Thank you, Madam Mayor and Council. As stated, this is a kind of a combined report from myself and the Acting Director of Finance. So any numbers or any comments, I guess, and questions around the finances will be directed to Ms. McCauley. So we'll start maybe with a bit of a background, because this project actually has been around and been discussed for about 20 years. So back in, as the report says, about 20 years ago, the city began to explore options for developing a new method of treating our liquid waste and discharging the treated effluent into the environment. In 2003, it was identified and decided that the most cost-effective way to meet the city's wastewater treatment needs was to repurpose the catalyst paper mills lagoons that they had used since about the 50s and had become surplus to their needs. So we began to spend money in around 2012. In 2012 was when the first grant was applied for, and we were successful. We've been actually very successful with 2 grants totaling $18.1 million. On top of that, we've borrowed, in 2 occasions, we've borrowed $9.73 million. So yeah, around $27 million has already been in the city coffers for this project. So we've been working with Associated Engineering for quite a number of years, and they've provided engineering cost estimates for the components of the work, and these cost estimates help us to facilitate comparison of options. They're used in submission of grant applications and as well with budgeting on the projects or on this project. So the actual project costs, as we put it in the report, cannot really be known until there's a competitive bidding process done. So calls for tenders or requests for proposals. And those calls for tenders started around early 2018. So in some cases, the costs were higher than what was projected at that time. Yeah, engineering costs are not included in tendered costs, so they end up being extra as well. So where we are today, basically in 2018, before any tendering, we were looking at a projected cost estimate of $31.65 million. Where we are now, approximately 70% complete on construction. We're looking at an overall program cost of about $37.9 million. So given the money that we have, the money we need to complete, we need $9.98 million to complete the project. So we're looking at the difference between the 2018 estimates and 2020 estimates. As I said, a lot of the tender prices were higher as those parts were tendered. Engineering costs have gone up significantly. The originally envisioned construction timeline would have taken us to about Christmas of 2018, and now we're looking at summer by the time the plant will be commissioned. Some of that's due to preloading, unforeseen, some soft soils underneath where the buildings are situated, requirements for seismic, that kind of thing. I don't think anybody envisioned the amount of consultation and work associated with the regulatory approvals, the amounts of reports, the amounts of back and forth and studies and additional testing and that sort of thing that we've had to do over the course of even during the project while we're under construction. We're still working with the Ministry of Environment to get our final approval on the or the registration of the project. Yeah, one part of the project we actually redesigned after it was put out to tender, and that was around the effluent pump stations. So there's 2 pump stations that will actually pump the effluent out into the environment. Those were redesigned because I think the original estimate was like 1.3 million, and the low bids were over 4 million. Yeah, just one piece of the project. Change work orders, so any emerging challenges, like a lot of geotechnical issues that were encountered on site, they've added additional costs. Yeah, the cost to decommission the city's existing lagoon, of course, it's work that hasn't been done yet, and maybe wasn't looked at the level of detail that they are now as we're getting on into the project. But the Associated has increased the budget on that from 691,000 to 1.4 million, and that work includes desludging or possibly desludging the existing lagoon, demolition of the existing buildings, and as well as excavating and backfilling the berm for permanent installation of the 6 sewer force mains that end up at the lagoons. And the final bit of work that'll be required is the reclamation, which is the full restoration of the decommissioned lagoon area. Is yet to be determined because the city's committed to public consultation on that. Like the rest of the report basically speaks to the implications around borrowing, the money that is in our sewer reserve at 4.3 million. City currently has an asset-free borrowing capacity at 8.3 million. So anyway, the recommendation is to use the money in the reserve at 4.3 million in the city sewer reserve fund, and to go to the municipal financing authority for the balance of 5.68 million. Be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Any questions? Councillor Poon.
Thank you. Well, I'm sure nobody wants to spend this money, but what are the consequences if we don't pass this motion, I guess?
Well, we need to meet our obligations to the regulatory agencies. I mean, like I said, the project is around 70% complete. We can see some light at the end of the tunnel. Yeah, I don't think there's a stopping point at this part of the project. Like I said, it's a long overdue project, and yeah, there's a lot on the line, let's say, to make sure that this gets done.
Councillor Paulson.
Just a quick comment, and maybe you can concur with this, but through this whole process, it really is evolving to comply with new and evolving federal and provincial regulations. So we're not the only municipality that's doing this kind of work. Victoria has finally been forced into doing it, and it is regulatory work that has to be done for municipalities based on federal and provincial regulations, from what I understand.
Correct.
If I'm not correct.
Correct. Yep.
Thank you. Councillor Corbeil.
Well, if you may have already looked into this, but when I read this, I wondered, are there any other grants available? And there is a wastewater grant that is effective. You have to apply before February 26th, and it pays up to 73% of the project costs. Have you or anybody looked into that?
Generally, the grants that are available, if you're midstream, if you've already broken ground, you're not eligible. So you have to have basically a shelf-ready design, all those estimates up front, and then they'll give you the funding if you're underway. Generally speaking, and I think it's pretty safe to say that you wouldn't be eligible.
Even if there were unforeseen costs that we've run into here?
We may be able to look for something for the restoration, let's say, there may be groups out there that want to provide some funding for that.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Haggard.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. At the October meeting, when we awarded the $3 million contract, you said this was the last piece of the puzzle. So I was quite surprised when we got this in our package that we needed an additional almost $10 million. So it would have been nice if we could have had some foresight that this was coming up and not just come out of thin air. So, you know, this is a lot of money that we're over budget that we need to look at. I'm also having some trouble reconciling your numbers. If you look at the spreadsheet of the total program cost, the difference is $6.25 million, this one here. And then on the last budget that I received, for borrowing, you have $4,689,790, but in your report, you say we need $5.68 million. So I've got three different numbers here.
This may be a question for the Director of Finance.
I could take a stab at it. There was actually, in the budget, there was two numbers. One was borrowing and one was from reserve.
Yeah, I've got both of those.
So the borrowing number, I think, was an early estimate before we had the numbers in the January numbers, let's say.
Okay, so they've changed this then.
Yeah, there's been some updating and some scoping of things.
So it's changed by
over
$1
the
million
course.
in less than a month?
The estimates have, yeah.
Okay. Councillor Washington, did you have any questions? Okay.
Madam Mayor, can I jump in on that last question?
Sure.
We had some discussion at staff level while we're doing budget at the same time as council's waiting for this report to come back. And we discussed whether we should amend the draft financial plan to reflect what we were learning were higher borrowing costs. And I made the decision not to change the budget and then have to speak to that change without the supporting documents you have now. So I made the decision that it wasn't going to impact taxes this year, so that we would change that budget after this discussion. So that maybe that's why you're seeing lower borrowing costs in the draft budget that will now be reflected, changed to reflect this report. And it was really about trying to decide what was the best way to deliver that information with supporting background.
And to be clear, none of these costs impact our current tax increase any more or less. It's all funded through sewer fees.
That question Ms. McCauley can answer.
Madam Mayor, so the impact on the operating budget is nil. The sewer fees will cover the principal and interest payments on the loans. So there is an impact that we will be paying the principal and interest on the loans. The loan itself will not impact. And also the $4.3 million will be coming out of our reserve, so that will not impact any cost onto the
So money we've already saved for the project. Okay. Did you have a follow-up question,
Yeah,
Councillor Haggard?
part of my question was on your spreadsheet here, the difference is $6.25 million. Is that out of date as well then?
The estimate
Right
that we've
here.
used, you're looking at the 37.8 million? And the actual borrowing number, is that correct?
No, this one here, it says projected and then actuals. The difference is $6.25 million on this spreadsheet here.
Yep, so the difference between those two numbers, I'll have to calculate exactly what our borrowing amounts are for, but I can't give you a solid answer as to the difference between the remainder and how it reconciles to this particular sheet, but we can definitely get you those numbers.
Madam Mayor, I can maybe shed some light on that. There's two issues in this report. One is staff are asking council to allocate $9.98 million to complete the project. The difference, however, as Councillor Haggard has pointed out, the difference between our 2018 projections and where we are today is $6.3 million. So the cost of the project is $6.3 million higher than we anticipated in 2018. But even in 2018, we knew we hadn't allocated enough money. We hadn't borrowed enough to, so we knew there would be further borrowing costs. And that's what we're here today talking. So that's where the 9.98 number comes from. That is not the cost, the difference in projections versus actual. That we hadn't allocated enough money anyway to complete the project. So we would have been asking for almost $4 million anyway, and we knew that, right? Does that help? It's hard to get our heads around two different things.
Mm-hmm.
But the actual increase in cost is 6.3 from what we projected in 2018. Is that correct, Wilf?
Correct.
Yeah.
Okay. Councillor Solda, did you have any questions? Okay. Okay. Councillor Washington, would you like to read the motions there?
Move that the council for the city of Port Alberni approve the allocation of $9.98 million for construction of the wastewater treatment plant WWTP upgrade, and that the funds be provided from the following sources: Sewer Infrastructure Reserve Fund, $4.3 million; additional borrowing via the Municipal Finance Authority, $5.68 million, for a total of $9.98 million.
Second, Madam Mayor.
Okay. Any further comments? Councillor Haggard.
Just a quick comment. I built a house about 5 years ago, and things always cost more than what you think, but you're into it, you can't get out of it. So there's no way we could say no at this point.
Doesn't make it any less frustrating, but yes. Okay, all in favor? Opposed? Carried. Okay, item 4 from the Manager of Planning, we have the 3rd Avenue Beautification Project.
Thank you, Madam Mayor and Council. So this report is coming forward from both myself and the Director of Public Works and Engineering. So we can both speak to some questions at the end as well. Our consultant, Mclean, is here joining us from Watt Consulting Group. So in terms of the background on the project, so in 2019, you'll all be familiar with your corporate strategic plan that outlines a number of goals and priority projects for the city to be focused on in the coming years. So one of those goals was to revitalize and reconfigure existing streets in a way that enables connected, safe, walkable green streets and accessible multimodal pathways. Specific priority streets were identified in the plan, and then as well to redevelop and repurpose other streets on an ongoing basis as well. So the priority streets were 3rd Avenue between Argyle and Mar, and as well along Argyle between 3rd Avenue and Harbor Key. So right in the uptown area there. So city staff have been working with Watt Consulting Group to develop a set of practical options that use a complete street model that would satisfy the vision of the strategic plan, as well as the active transportation plan. So we've been able to develop 3 design options, high-level design options for the 3rd Avenue section between Mar and Argyle. These design options are provided along with the consultant's report for council's consideration today. And so Mike's going to come up and give us a bit of a summary of those designs, and then I'll come back up.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. I'm Mike Skeen with Watt Consulting Group. We've got an office in Victoria. We're based out of there, but we've been doing downtown beautification projects for many communities on the island. So we're happy to be helping the city today and helping them reach their goals in the future. So, whoops, that one.
Almost no one can use this thing. We need a simpler.
Oh, there we go.
There we go, okay. So just an introduction, as Caitlin pointed out, it's part of your strategic plan priorities. Keeping in mind that revitalization includes providing an enjoyable place to shop, socialize, and carry out. It's not just a beautification plan, but that the street beautification plan is a part of the revitalization. We looked at several options. Just to throw out what didn't make the list were things like medians and where we couldn't create more public space out of it. It was a beautification element, but it really isn't usable for people places. Our methodology was using a complete streets principles, and that's kind of a term that we use in traffic engineering to include everything, including the land use in redesigning our streets. Transportation, mobility, safety, accessibility, and multiple users is part of those principles. Placemaking, which is where people want to socialize, have coffee, do busking, start to activate the street. So that's where placemaking takes place. And then green infrastructure, just making it nice, landscaped, and a place that's comfortable and safe. Existing conditions, so looking at 3rd Avenue, really, we have right now 4 lanes with angle parking, 3.2 meter sidewalks, some textured crosswalks, and curb bulbs and extensions at the intersections of mid-block to accommodate pedestrians. So that's what we're kind of working with, and what we are aiming to do is look at the angle parking as a way of increasing more public area. We've got 3 options. The first one is really balancing mobility with placemaking. It's looking at both of those in an equal way. So we're reducing two travel lanes from the 4 that are existing. We're achieving 4.8 meter sidewalks, separated bike lanes with a buffer, be a painted buffer, and potentially could be separated in the future, and increasing the green space along the curb area. Some of the advantages or disadvantages, so we are meeting some of the principles of placemaking, creating 23% more space, potential for 32 more trees. Parked vehicles provide separation between moving vehicles and the public area, the pedestrian area. Painted buffer reduces the potential for dooring and those types of incidences with the cyclists. The disadvantages is that compared to the other options, we're not creating as much green space. It is an increase from existing, though, to note. There is a potential conflict between cyclists and passengers that are walking to the parked vehicles. And in all these options, there's a reduction of 14 parking stalls that go from the angle parking to the parallel parking. Option 2 was really taking a more focused look on the public space option. So we've integrated the cyclists into the through traffic with sharrows. We again reduced the cross-section to 2 travel lanes. And we've been able to create a 2.5 meter green green space, but public area as well. So the increase in public area is significant, 42%. Again, 32 more trees. The other benefit is the curb returns are closer together, so it's the shortest crossing distance at intersections for pedestrians to lessen the exposure to of pedestrians to moving traffic. But some of the disadvantages are that we need to create wider travel lanes to accommodate the cyclists. So we're at 4.3 meters, where it's typically we'd be at 3.5. There's no separation between cyclists and traffic. There's a higher potential of conflicts between cyclists and traffic, potential for dooring as well. Reduction of 14 parking spots, as I said, occurs in all 3 options. This particular option would not be eligible for BC Active Transportation Infrastructure because it really doesn't accommodate cyclists well, so it wouldn't be eligible, and it's not what's envisioned in the active transportation plan. Final option is more of a mobility option, where we've taken a lot of the residual area and dedicate it to protection for and accommodation for cyclists. So it's what we call a cycle track. It's a 1.5 meter buffer between the parking lane and the bike lane, and provides for the cyclists within that. There's quite a bit of landscaping that can be added to the road as a result, because we have a 1.5 meter buffer that could be landscaped, as well as the boulevard area. This option, the pros and cons, it has the most landscape area, but not as much of the public space area. So if you understand the difference between planters and trees versus where people can actually sit and socialize. Potential for 32 additional trees, physical separation for cyclists, widest separation for a bike lane and sidewalk. It is the most eligible for grant funding from that active transportation grant source. Summary, option 1 and 2 are basically the same in cost. Option 1 provides buffered bike lanes, which meets the active transportation plan, gives green space and additional public place space. Option 2, it's same cost, however, does not separate cyclists from traffic. And option 3, although it created a lot more green space and provided the safest for cycling, it didn't provide a lot of space for public space, and it was the most costly. So recommendation in consolidation or consideration with staff and discussions with staff were that option 1 go forward. Thank you.
Oops. Oh, that's not me. Okay. Yeah, so as summarized by our consultant, the staff are recommending option number 1. We find that it provides the most holistic yet cost-effective design and helps enhance both public space and mobility options for the uptown area. Once a design concept is endorsed by council, staff will be able to go back and do some further work on actually developing a detailed design. And once we have that detailed design in hand is when we'll be able to actually start bringing some well-established cost estimates. So right now the cost estimates that we have are kind of high level based on the conceptual elements of it, but not detailed based on what would actually be on the ground. So we would be coming back with revised information around the actual budget. We would also like to apply for the BC Active Transportation Grant to help fund the project as well.
Okay, thank you. Are there any questions from council? Councillor Haggard.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I feel like I'm being a little bit cranky today. Sorry about that. I've had the flu. I would like, before we vote on an option, I would like to have the opportunity to invite the Uptown Merchants Association to give their feedback. Would it be possible to maybe have a committee of the whole meeting and invite them here one evening and hear what they have to say about the options?
So I will let you know that I have spoken with the Uptown Merchants about the options. So I attended one of their meetings in December with some preliminary concepts. And I think originally their idea was that we would have a center median. And when I started talking to them about what was being recommended from the consultants and the recommendations of our planner to bring both of the shopping areas together and make them more pedestrian focused by expanding the sidewalks rather than separating the two of them by putting a treed boulevard, they were very excited about that idea. I did forward the report to them as well. I think that we certainly could do a committee of the whole for this, but council's direction was to try to complete this project this year. And so I think that's kind of, and I think we additionally had a pretty clear idea of, you know, what we wanted this project to go forward like. So I think we have their general support, but that said, we certainly can keep talking to them going forward. I think they're just very excited to see this moving forward.
I'm very glad to hear that you have been consulting with them along the way. So if you've done that, I'm fine with that. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Washington, anything to add?
Yes, they are very excited. So if we go with the option 1, which is what 1.25, can we upgrade later, or can it be upgraded to an option 3 at a later date for?
I think that's a really good question. Yeah. If either the planner or the director of engineering would like to comment.
Yeah, so with a separated bike lane in option 1, we could absolutely add curbing or some small landscaping in the future when budget was made available for that. Absolutely. Yeah, that's a good thing about that plan is that it's upgradable for sure.
Yeah, thank you. Great question. Councillor Solda.
So just a couple of questions. First of all, I don't think it's just the uptown merchants, it's also the community that needs to be part of this. And there are potential, maybe business owners that might want to move to this, to Third Avenue. So I think that it's important that the community's involved. But my question is regarding the bike lanes. If you put the bike lanes in, people still will be able to park because there is no block there or anything like that, right, to inhibit that, right? Am I correct? Okay. The second one is regarding the trucks on the street. If we go into single lane traffic, and I know we all want the trucks off Third Avenue up the hill there and by the stores and businesses, will that inhibit the trucks going up and down? Because now, if we're in single lane, they're closer to the businesses, than they were before.
They wouldn't be closer to the businesses.
Well, if you're in single lane, there's not that double lane, right?
They'll be further away from the businesses.
Oh, okay, so it's further away?
Well, there'll be the same amount of space
Yeah.
from the businesses.
But,
We're not moving the
I
buildings.
comprehend that. I just want to clarify this, okay?
Yeah.
So what is your take on that?
So the two middle lanes would be the same, so all the traffic
Okay.
would be down the
I
middle,
realize that
middle
now.
of the right of way. I think we're already seeing a lot of the trucks moving out of the
Reduction.
downtown. I think there's been a reduction. Part of it to do with the log dump on the other side of the estuary. Some of the truckers rerouting themselves. Yeah, I think if it becomes a more busy, vibrant, pedestrian area, I think the trucks will move. I mean, the only way you can force them, obviously, is through a bylaw. But
Okay,
Yeah.
and the next question is regarding the trees. I love trees, I have no problem with that, but for watering and different things, I know we can let Mother Nature do this, but I'm sure any plants and that, we do that. So how will that be addressed? And I know the Public Works had some qualms about the roots and different things wrapping around our infrastructure underground, so how do we deal with that? Because there were a lot of trees in the past, and they were taken down because of different issues. So I'm just kind of curious to know how we will move forward with this.
So tree placement and utility placement, you need to consider them together. We've been doing, or the Parks Department's actually been using a different medium to plant the trees in, so there's less pushing, there's more room for those roots to grow without getting involved with all the other stuff in the underground. Yeah, there's mature trees there. I think the space needs to include a lot of vegetation. I think with planters and that, we would irrigate them.
Okay.
I mean, there's water there, so we'd irrigate them. We'd make that part of the plan.
So, and blooming trees, we had issues too with blooming trees. They were making a big mess, and a lot of the other communities have had that issue. So how do we have a certain type of tree that we'd plant, and would we have bloom issues?
Yeah, I mean, the deciduous trees obviously, keep our sweeper working. I know the Parks Department who look after all our boulevard trees, they've been planting some other types of trees. Again, not really my area of expertise, but it's certainly something to be considered when we're looking at the types of trees to put in.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Corbeil.
A couple questions. One, the 1.25 million or whatever the cost was, that includes things like water and sewer that would have to be replaced anyways, no?
No, so we put some money in water and in sewer. We're not 100% sure yet whether that needs to be done. We wanted to put something in the budget to cover the eventuality if that's a decision that gets made, but we haven't made the decision 100% on that. We know we've got an old water main, it survived the last revitalization project. We still need to make that decision. The sewer, we need to camera. So once we've done that, we'll have some better information.
Okay, and for Michael, first of all, I'm glad to see you're building on the plan that was done in 1992. That's good. One of the options that I didn't see up there, and it might be because it's you can't get grant funding, is something like the seawall where the pedestrians and the bikes are separated, and it's not bikes and car doors. Was there any reason why the seawall concept wasn't one of the options?
I can't remember if it was on our short list or longer list, I meant. But the problem that we would run into is just the traffic operations and the safety at the intersections. So we kind of had that as a lower priority than creating more public space on both sides of the road than dedicated corridors that we'd have problems with at those intersections.
Okay, and lastly, you talked about some of the options would have more availability of grants. What kind of, could you even have a guess of what kind of money we're looking at for grants?
I don't.
I think we'd been told around $400,000 there was a grant opportunity for.
Okay. Okay, and those are my questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Poon.
Thank you. I'm just wondering, between option 1 and 2, which option would have the most potential for grant funding?
I think it did say in the report that option 2 is not really eligible.
Oh, okay.
And if we're talking about the active transportation grant, which replaced the Bike BC grant, yeah, certainly we don't see them contributing to that because it doesn't do much for the bikes.
I'm definitely in favor of option 1. I think this is a great direction for the city to go for. So I would be in favor, yeah.
Thank you. Councillor Paulson.
I'd just like to comment as well, like option 1 I think is a great balance, if you will. As a former bike rider in our community, I gave my bike away because it's not much fun. Everything in this town, no matter how much fun you have going downhill, you got to come back uphill.
There's electric bikes now, though.
Well, yeah, but, you know, anyway, I think this is a great blend of allowing for cycling, but I don't think, and I read through that 92 report, we're not Victoria, and we don't have those flat spaces that you can bike comfortably in, especially in an elderly person. And I gave my bike away because it wasn't fun. I actually gave it away, and I used to ride my bike a lot, and I just don't do it anymore.
Did you just call yourself elderly?
I didn't say old, I said elder.
Elder, mature.
Yeah, mature. Yes, like some of the trees up there.
Councillor Solda.
Just to refresh me, I can't remember, I should have looked. There's electrical wires, do we bury, they are underground, that's what I wanted to make sure, that if we're gonna dig up, let's put the electrical underground. So, okay, and Madam Mayor, question for you. So when we vote on this, we're actually voting on the project, but not on the budget part of it till budget time, correct?
Yes, I think we're voting on the concept,
Okay,
and our CIO has indicated that, you know, we see that, you know, these numbers aren't necessarily representative of using our own staff, and there's some potential savings through other initiatives. So.
Okay, good, because we'll talk money later.
Would you like to read the motion then?
That was a good one. Okay, so I'll move that the city select design option 1 entitled Balanced Mobility Placemaking Improvements for a 3rd Avenue Beautification Project as identified in the report prepared by Watt Consulting Group dated for reference January 20th, 2020.
Okay, is there a seconder? Second, Madam Mayor. Okay, and I haven't spoken, but I am very excited about this option. I think it falls so closely in line with, you know, what we worked to try to achieve in our strategic plan, and I'm excited to see council actually coming together on this and unanimously agreeing on option 1 for it seems for
You're
one.
looking at me.
I'm looking at everyone, but you know, we worked really hard to build a vision in our strategic plan, and I think this project really is the first step of moving forward with that vision. And great job to staff and our consultant in realizing what that vision was and giving us not just an option that we can move forward with right now, but an option with potential to improve down the road as well. So very excited to see us making progress on this. Okay, moved and seconded. All in favor? Carried. Thank you. And if you want to read the second one as well.
Madam Mayor, I'll move that the City Council authorize staff to apply for the BC Active Transportation Grant as it relates to the 3rd Avenue Beautification Project.
Second, Madam Mayor.
Any questions or comments? Okay, all in favor? Carried. Thank you. Okay, moving on to item 5 from the Manager of Planning. We have the Advisory Planning Commission report.
There. So thank you, Madam Mayor and Council. So before you for consideration is an application for a development variance permit to vary the maximum height and maximum number of principal building stories from 3 to 5 at 6151 Russell Place. The applicants are here in the audience today, so they can speak to any additional questions at the end if you have any for them. So the subject property is about 3.5 acres in size and is home to the Rainbow Gardens Care Facility. The proposed variance would enable an additional 39 units of social housing targeted to seniors living in the Alberni Valley to be developed on site. The proposed development would be built on the remaining developable area of the site at the southwesterly portion of Lot 1. A geotechnical report found that the soil most suitable for development is limited to that west edge of the property, since there's a heavily sloped area that's not suitable because of that slope and because of the soil conditions. So therefore, the applicant wishes to build a higher building in order to still achieve the certain number of desired units on site. The proposed building will be set back from both Moore Road and Russell Place and located along the west edge of the property as recommended by the geotech report. The building will be located in a low-lying portion of the property, so kind of a bit of a gully there where the trees used to be on site, which will mitigate visual impacts of the additional height to the neighborhood. The development will also be attractive and modern in style, which will contribute to the appeal of the neighborhood as well. So the Planning Department supports the issuance of a development variance permit at 6151 Russell Place.
Thank you. Are there questions from council? Okay. We do have the applicants in the room. If anyone has any questions about the project specifically. Seeing none. Okay. Councillor Corbeil.
Just a quick question. If I'm right, in the left-hand side, is that where the cemetery is? And is there access off of that short little road into this project?
No, that is not where the cemetery is located.
Oh, right in that.
Oh, that cemetery. Sorry, I'm thinking of a different cemetery. Sorry. Yes. No, there's not planned to be access to the cemetery.
From that little road that goes beside the cemetery, there won't be access through there?
I don't believe that there'll be access through, no.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. Councillor Corbeil, would you like to read the motion?
Yes, Madam Mayor, that the City Council proceed with the necessary development variance permit to vary zoning bylaw number 4832 as follows. Vary the maximum height from the required 12.5 meters, 41 feet, to 17.71 meters, 58.1 feet, and to vary the maximum number of principal building stories permitted from 3 to 5 at 6151 Russell Place.
Great. Any further discussion on this? Okay, I just wanted to say that I'm very excited to see the completion of the last project that the applicants did, and looking forward to seeing another quality housing building in our community. On the motion, all in favor? Carried. Thank you. Okay, item 6 from the Director of Parks, Recreation and Heritage. We have the Community Investment Program late applications.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. At the January 13th regular meeting of Council directed staff to work with representatives of the Toy Run and Portal Players to accommodate their funding requests for the 2020 cycle. Excuse me. As a point of reference, in 2019, the in-kind support the Toy Run and the Portal Players received was $1,500 and $1,871.10, respectively. On January 14th, the Port Alberni Friendship Centre inquired with Council regarding an in-kind support for a community event celebrating National Indigenous Peoples Day, and staff are currently working with the Friendship Centre to determine what the cost of that event might be. And so the impact here of Council allocating $10,000 from our 2019 General Reserve in Sustainability and Community Development would ensure that these 3 initiatives are all supported, as well as provide a buffer if other late applications are submitted, and would also have no impact on taxation this year.
Thank you. Are there any questions from council? Councillor Haggard.
I'm sorry, maybe I missed it. How much in-kind contribution is going to the Port au Players Dramatic Society?
So Port au Players in 2019 was $1,500.
Okay.
And the toy run was $1,500 and Port au Players was $1,871
okay.
and 10 cents.
Because Port au Players just received $17,500 from the 100 plus women who care.
Correct.
Would that impact their ability to receive funding at all?
Madam Mayor, not typically. So other grants that organizations are successful on don't typically impact the community investment program itself. However, if council wishes to impact their decision on this report, of course, that's your choice.
Okay. Thank you. Councillor Washington.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm pleased to see that we proceeded with this. Like you say, it's all in-kind support, but I know specifically the toy run, the community will receive that back in way more than $1,500. So pleased with the report.
Thank you. Any other comments? Okay. Councillor Haggard.
Did we stress to these two organizations about the deadline for next year, that there is no going past the deadline? This is a one-time get-out-of-jail-free card?
Madam Mayor, I have not given that direction to either organization. Staff followed the direction given by council. I have outlined in my staff report a recommendation that council does reach out, or there's some messaging to applicants so that confidence in the community investment program timelines and process can be retained as we move forward.
Thank you. Okay. Councillor Paulson, would you like to read this motion?
I'd like to move that council for the city of Port Alberni support the late applications to the Community Investment Program 2020 cycle, with an additional $10,000 being allocated to the program from the city's 2019 contingency fund.
Thank you. Is there a seconder? Thank you. And seeing no further comments, all in favor? Carried. Okay, item 7 is from the Acting Director of Finance. We have our Computerized Asset Management Maintenance System RFP, number 020-19.
Madam Mayor, I know it's actually a mouthful, computerized management maintenance system. So this is just one of the steps in our asset management plan. So just do a brief summary. In 2018, the city did secure specific gas tax funding of $550,000 for a strategic asset implementation plan. So we've been working with Associated Engineering, our consulting group, in order to nail down an implementation plan, come up with different policies around asset management, what frameworks we're looking at for levels of service the city wants to provide, an asset management life cycle, as well as risk and criticality to the assets. I did provide a timeline with this package, and I kind of want to just do an overview of it so you understand where we are currently in the process. So in June 2018, we did establish our Strategic Asset Management Committee. We also have worked on looking at a risk matrix, understanding our current roadmap to improve asset management practices within the city. We also looked at creating an asset management policy, vision, and leadership. We also did a business case template that covered the 3 years that we currently have to complete the project as per our grant funding. So that leads us up to date. For December 2019, we started the process of tendering our RFP for the asset management system. The system itself will basically hold all of our asset information. So not only an inventory inventory, but it'll also include any day-to-day maintenance, preventative, any capital spent on any of our assets. And in the end, we're going to be able to kind of bridge a gap on our knowledge on our assets, how, what are their life cycles, when they should be replaced, what are the cost of replacements, or what are the cost of repairing over the life cycle of an asset. So it's a very critical system. So we did meet before Christmas time, and we did an evaluation of two proponents, Lucidity AM and Asset Finder. They were the only two proponents that submitted for the RFP. So we did develop a evaluation matrix based on not only technical requirements, but requirements from all different departments. So we looked at Public Works, Finance, Parks and Rec, maintenance, all different areas to develop this matrix for evaluation. And it turns out that Asset Finder was the overall best proponent.
Okay. Thank you. Are there any questions on this? Okay, thank you for the report, and generally for the update on what we're doing with this. We've heard over the last few years that we've received a grant and working through a process, but it's nice to get a better idea of what that process is. So looking forward to seeing this completed. Councillor Poon, would you like to read that motion?
Yes. I'll move that Council for City of Port Alberni receive the report from the Acting Director of Finance and award RFP 020-19 to the proponent Asset Finder for the provision of a computerized asset management maintenance system in the amount of $240,619 with funding from grant monies received in 2018 gas tax funding.
Second, Madam Mayor.
Okay, any comments? All in favor? Carried, thank you. And item 8 from the Deputy City Clerk to authorize Mayor Minions, Council and Councillor Corbeil to attend the BC Council of Forest Industries April 1st to April 3rd, 2020 in Prince George. And I think there's a note in there that my registration and hotel are covered by Kofi. So it's just travel and then Councillor Corbeil's registration. Councillor Haggard.
I think at this time in our forestry industry is at a very crucial point, so I think it's imperative that we have representation at this conference.
Thank you. Okay. Councillor Solda.
Madam Mayor, I'll move that the council authorize Mayor Minions and Councillor Corbeil to attend the BC Council of Forest Industries 2020 convention taking place April 1st, 3rd, 2020 in Prince George, BC, and authorization to include reimbursement of expenses incurred as per city policy number P6 travel expense.
Is there
Second, Madam Mayor.
Okay. Seeing no further comments, all in favor? Carried. Thank you. And item 9 from the Deputy City Clerk, authorization for Councillor Poon to attend Local Government Leadership Academy's LGLA 2020 Leadership Forum. Okay. Would somebody like Councillor Washington?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I move that council authorize Councillor Poon to attend the Local Government Leadership Academy LGLA 2020 Leadership Forum taking place February 5 to 7, 2020 in Richmond, BC, with authorization to include reimbursement of expenses incurred as per city policy number P6 travel expense.
Okay. Any further questions or comments? Okay. Seeing none, all in favor? Carried. Thank you. And item 10, managers' reports. The first one from the RCMP. Welcome.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Madam Mayor, councillors, city staff. Thank you for having me. This is my first quarterly report, possibly my last. We'll see how that goes. Before I get into that, just for your awareness, I've been advised that the selection process to identify a new officer in charge of Port Alberni Detachment took place this last Friday. Perhaps some of you were involved in that. I'm not privy to the results of that, but I'm optimistic that an announcement will be made shortly, and we can move on to the process to bringing in our new detachment commander. In simple terms, this report represents the policing activities undertaken by the Port Alberni RCMP Detachment during the fourth quarter of 2019, October to December. I have some statistics following the written portion of this that are provided as comparators. The following represents some of the calls for services received, investigations undertaken, and activities of the RCMP during the quarter. In this time period, officers received and responded to 3,511 calls for service. 2,829 of these calls occurred in the city of Port Alberni. As I'm sure you're aware, the remainder of our calls for service would be in our greater detachment area, which is provincially funded. In this time frame, the number of criminal offenses are up 9% for the quarter compared to 2018, and criminal offenses are up 5% for the year. In this time frame, property crime is up 39% for the quarter, and this is consistent throughout the province due to a new reporting guideline that skews the values higher. Prior to this, when we were assessing the outcome of our investigations, there was a category that many files were concluded with, which was unsubstantiated. That's no longer a status that we can apply to our investigations, so far more of them are going to be characterized as a criminal offense that occurred. Whether it's solved or unsolved is irrelevant to that. Property crime, or crime overall for the year, is up. Pardon me. In this, in the last year, overall crime is up 25%, and that is also going to be factored in by some of these scoring changes. Possession of stolen property is down significantly for the period due to several projects led by the Crime Reduction Unit, which resulted in identifying several prolific offenders and the courts holding them in custody. The community experienced a significant amount of recidivism during the year from several of our chronic offenders. However, the benefits of our Crime Reduction Unit have been apparent this quarter. That being said, I can tell you that right at the moment our Crime Reduction Unit is working on an identified prolific offender who is being held in custody at the moment, which we're hoping will continue to yield benefits for the community. I'm sure many of you are aware that every RCMP detachment produces an annual performance plan, what we refer to as our APP. From my time here in the chambers, I can see you're not new to acronyms. So. However, within the annual performance plan, our detachment, in consultation with our community partners, identifies some of our priority issues. The priority issues going into 2020 are going to be traffic, road safety, family violence, crime reduction, Aboriginal policing, and youth. A couple of comments that I would make regarding some of our initiatives within the community. Our Aboriginal policing unit has done some outstanding work developing Indigenous support team. They're forming new partnerships with our First Nations community, and they're identifying some of our most vulnerable community members that are of First Nations and getting them the help that they need in conjunction with the community partners. And they've been recognized throughout the province for doing some excellent work in that area. Through the past several years, we've lost track of our youth initiative due to some vacancies at the detachment, and our dedicated youth officer had been pulled back into the general duty stream. I'm happy to say that as of this fall, our dedicated youth officer, Constable Jamie Wassailing, is back on duty in that capacity and working at that full time, and he makes a big difference to the young people in our community. So, if you'd like to have a look at the statistics that follow, it's essentially a breakdown by crime type of some of the changes from one year to next in the last quarter of the year. I believe that this should be pretty straightforward, and again, I would advise you that a significant number of the crime categories that have gone up are largely due to this change in our scoring rules. Whereas there'd be a significant number of some of these files that would have been unsubstantiated in previous years, they're now no longer scored that way, so they're considered criminal offenses that occurred. And I'd be open to any questions.
Great. Thank you. Councillor, are there any questions? Councillor Washington.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Sergeant, I read somewhere, I'm thinking social media, about the distracted driving laws that are taking place February 2020. Is that, do you know, am I reading like National Enquirer news, or is it real news, or is there a program that, like, come February 2020 you could be charged for drinking a cup of coffee while you're driving?
I read that too. Probably have the same source. What I would say about that is that there's no directed enforcement or lack of discretion being applied to distracted driving laws. And the extent that are detailed there in the minutiae of that, the document that I read, which I can only assume is the same one that you read, is going to speak to the wide range of things that could be considered as distracting to drivers, but it's still going to be at the discretion of the investigating officer and this totality of the circumstances. For instance, if you're drinking a cup of coffee but you had to reach down on the floor of the passenger seat to get it, I would suggest you were distracted. Further to that, you may not always be able to talk yourself out of a ticket, but you can always talk yourself into one.
Thank you. Councillor Haggard.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. You may not know the answer to this, but many of our crimes have risen a certain percentage. Do you know how we compare to other communities on the island? Are we sort of in the same
We're in the
range?
same. We're in the same range, but actually there are some of the other communities on Vancouver Island that are experiencing a greater increase.
Thank you.
Okay.
Any questions, Councillor Paulson? Any questions over here? Okay. Thank you very much for coming. And we'll see, maybe not your last report.
Perhaps
we'll
not.
let you come back.
All right. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Corbeil, would you move receipt of this report?
Yes, Madam Mayor, I'd like to move that the fourth quarter report from Acting Officer in Charge Sergeant Peter Dion, the RCMP, dated January 20th, providing information about current department operations, be received.
Second? Perfect. All in favor? Carried. Thank you. Okay, and on to the Director of Parks, Recreation and Heritage. Usually you get to be the fun report.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. As you'll see from my report there and the beautiful before and after pics at the bottom of the page there, the 2019 Parks Canada Cost Sharing Grant Project was complete on time and on budget thanks to the great work of Rob Cranevelt, our Facility Operations Supervisor. So our application for the 2020 grant cycle was submitted in November, which we expect to hear back if we were successful on that grant. We'll hear back in March. And that grant will include the next recommended steps from the site assessment that we completed in 2018, which includes such projects as combating some of the soil encroachment around the property, interior work on the Workers' House, Cookhouse, and Arnold Mclean House, and design and developing scope for rebuilding the log hall. And I'd be happy to answer any questions council might have.
Okay. Councillor Solda.
Madam Mayor, question is, how much of a grant did we get and how much was the project for all the roofs?
Madam Mayor, we received $120,000 in the grant, and we spent $101,175 of the 120.
Super, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Haggard.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just want to say these buildings look great, and I wish we would have had you and your staff 20 years ago, and I think Mclean Mill will look very differently than it does. So thank you so much for all of your hard work to this project.
Thank you.
Councillor Washington.
Thank you. I'm just relieved to see that you didn't put another blue tarp on top of the blue tarp that had a blue tarp on it. So good job. Very happy with that. Thank you.
Thank you. And I think that this is an example of how we can manage our asset going forward. And as we voted earlier today on the contract with the Chamber to manage the non-historic site. This is an example of how we can manage the historic aspects or assets on our site and leverage grant funds and the heritage fee that we're looking to collect, and actually make sure that the site is there 50, 100, however many years down the road.
In perpetuity.
In perpetuity. That's right. Councillor Soldo, would you like to move receipt of the report?
Motion to receive the report.
Second, Madam Mayor.
All in favor? Carried. Thank you very much. And item 11 from our CAO, early budget approval for a specific item.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Our third fund report in a row. Madam Mayor, this time of year, we always, most often, we bring a report forward asking council to consider early budget approval for items that, for different reasons, that we prefer not to wait until budget is closed on. This year we have one request, and that is that council give early approval for a new position of a development permit. My report makes mention of a development planner, I'm sorry. My report makes mention of a project planner, but it's actually a development planner. And my report also points out and requests funding approval of $130,000. The annual cost for that position is $130,000. In 2020, because we're prorating, if you like, for part of a year, that I would ask that council would modify that motion and read $97,500.
So we could read it as $97,500 for 2020 and $130,000 ongoing.
Sure.
Okay. Councillor Solda.
Madam Mayor, with all the development that's happening in Port Alberni and with Rainbow Gardens, everything, ADSS site, I'm going to move that the Council for the City of Port Alberni provide early approval for $97,500 for 2020 and $130,000 from there on for general revenue for the creation and filling of a new development planner position.
Second, Madam Mayor.
Okay, and any more comments on this? Councillor Haggard?
As a member of the Advisory Planning Commission, I've known for several months that the planning department needs extra support. The amount of development projects coming in have greatly increased, and the complexity of these projects has also increased. I don't like to incur any extra staff unless we absolutely have to, but this is one of these have-tos that we have to do in order to keep moving forward.
That's great. Councillor Poon.
I'm very pleased to hear that that department is growing, and also to know that there's continued interest in developing properties in Port Alberni.
Thank you. Councillor Solda?
Just a quick comment. I know in the past, our past planner had a lot of issues and he needed the help, and I am glad this council is moving forward in getting our present planner the help that she requires.
Great. Okay. Seeing no further comments, it's been moved and seconded. All in favor? Carried. And item G, bylaws. And the first one from the Manager of Planning, official community plan, bylaw and zoning amendments. This is just final reading, but maybe just a quick summary of.
If I can also be a SAP, I would like to say thank you very much for your support of our department. It means a lot, so thank you. Not that you don't see enough of me as it is, but maybe you'll see more of me now. Before you for consideration is the final adoption of official community plan amendment number 27, 2940 Bells Hill Road, bylaw number 4985, and zoning bylaw map amendment number 32, bylaw number 4986. The amendments would change the OCP designation of 2940 Bells Hill Road from future residential to residential use, and rezone the property from future development to RR2 semi-rural residential zone. The purpose of the rezoning is to facilitate the subdivision of the property into 2 large parcels. Final adoption of the bylaws was subject to the issuance of a preliminary layout review letter, which stipulates the conditions of subdivision, and that condition has now been met. So the applicant has received their preliminary layout review letter. As such, the applicant has requested the final adoption be considered by council.
Thank you. Councillor Washington, would you like to read these?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I move that the official community plan amendment number 27, 2940 Belshire Road Carrier, bylaw number 4985, now finally be adopted, signed by the mayor and clerk and sealed with the corporate seal and numbered 4985, and that zoning bylaw map amendment number 32, 2940 Belshire Road Carrier, bylaw number 4986, now finally be adopted and signed by the mayor and clerk and sealed with the corporate seal and numbered 4986.
Thank you. Is there a seconder?
Second, Madam Mayor.
Okay, and any comments? Councillor Corbeil?
Was this the subdivision that throughout the process there was a suggestion that they would hook up to sewer? And if it was, is it hooked up to sewer?
Yes, that was part of the discussion, and one of the requirements from Vieja in order to allow for smaller lot subdivisions under 0.5 of an acre was a requirement to hook up to city infrastructure. That was cost prohibitive to the developer, so they decided to proceed with a 2-lot subdivision. So no sewer infrastructure is being connected at this time, but staff are working on looking at cost options for how the city can help facilitate infrastructure up that area to encourage extra development and densification moving forward.
Thank you. Okay. On the motion, all in favor? Carried. Thank you. And item H, correspondence for action. The first one is from the Alberni Clayoquot Regional District, a letter dated January 16th, 2020 from the ACRD advising that the ACRD will cost share with the City of Port Alberni to send Mayor Minions to FCM conference June 4th to 7th, 2020 in Toronto, Ontario. So the first motion, I believe, is for me. Oh, it's just receiving the letter. And then council conversation around who is interested in attending this year. I know that Councillor Paulson has expressed an interest, and Councillor... Okay. Okay. Anyone? I think Councillor Washington was unavailable, unfortunately. Anyone else interested in attending? Okay. Okay.
Madam Mayor, I'll move that the letter dated January 16, 2020 from the Alberni Clayoquot Regional District advising that the Board of Directors pass a resolution to cost share with the City of Port Alberni to send Mayor Minions to the Federation, the FCM conference in Toronto, Ontario, June 4th, 7th, 2020 be received.
Great. Is there a seconder for that? Okay. So on receipt of the letter, all in favor? Carried. And then on the second person to go, we have 2 people who are interested. Does council want to have discussion around that? I know that Councillor Haggard was supposed to attend last year and couldn't on short notice. My only feeling on this is that we did just appoint Councillor Haggard to the regional district, which I know is a large portfolio in general and something that often multiple councillors want to do. So I would love to go with you. If, council chooses to send you, that was my kind of only thought in possibly having someone else attend this year. But it's certainly the will of council and whatever people would like.
Madam Mayor, we could flip a coin.
We could certainly flip a coin. Councillor Paulson.
I've been to FCM in the past, and I would like to attend FCM again in this term if at the will of council. I would be more than happy to go to Toronto through the humidity and the smog in June. But if it doesn't go that way, then so be it.
Okay. Would somebody like to flip a coin, or do we have a consensus on who would like to attend?
Madam Mayor, if 3 people are wanting to go, put their names in a hat and draw a name. That'd probably be easier.
I think we have 2 people.
2? I thought there was 3, sorry.
No, Councillor Washington isn't available, unfortunately. Okay.
Let's flip a coin.
CAO, get us out a coin.
You know what? I'll defer to Councillor Haggard if I can go next year.
But I might want to go next year.
I think we should let the coins decide this. We're flipping a coin.
Do you have a coin?
Nobody's got coin in this day and age. Does anyone in the audience have a coin?
I got this one here, and it's got buffaloes on both sides.
Do we need a coin?
Okay. No, you go ahead.
No, you toss it. Yeah, it's
Okay,
gotta be
okay,
independent
okay.
arbitrator.
Okay. You do it, Cindy.
So what are we doing here?
Somebody call it.
Let the lady call it. It's heads or eagles.
Yes. There we go. It's American. It's Eagles.
It's Eagles.
You're staying home, kiddo. Give me my
Checking to
quarter
make
back.
sure that was a fair quarter.
That's 33 cents Canadian.
Roughly. Thank you. Okay, Councillor Solda, would you like to read the motion?
Sorry. I'll move that the council, or do we have to vote on the first one, or did we?
Oh, we
already?
did that
Okay.
one already.
I'll move that the council authorize Mayor Minions and Councillor Paulson to attend the 2020 FCM conference taking place in Toronto, Ontario, and that authorization includes reimbursement of expenses incurred as per the city's travel expense policy.
Thank you. Is there a seconder?
Second, Madam Mayor.
Okay, and council, before FCM, at the regional district, we are going to be having just a strategic conversation around what the regional district would like, accomplished, and if there's ministers we'd like to meet with. And I would suggest that we make sure we schedule time in advance enough for us to do the same at the city. I think it's easy. These conferences can be very valuable if we make an effort to connect with the right people. And I think given that it is close to Ottawa, that likely there will be, a good attendance of ministers, and we should look to our strategic plan for some strategic initiatives that we want to bring forward and make sure that we're strategic in our approach for that. Okay, so did we vote already? No. On the motion, all in favor? Carried. Item 2 from Ellen Frood, Executive Director of Alberni Community and Women's Services Society. We have an email dated January 8th, 2020, requesting the city enter a team and participate in the coldest night of the year. And a note that the city's clerk department has sent an email to all city staff inviting their participation. Would somebody like to move receipt of the letter?
So moved, Madam Mayor.
And anyone here want to volunteer to spearhead a team?
Crickets.
I did it the last 4 years, FYI.
Let's go for it.
Pretty good at it. That's right, actually. Councillor Haggard helped last year.
You have not been deposed.
Okay, well, to be determined who's going to spearhead the team. To be determined. Okay, on the motion, all in favor? Carried. And item number 3 from the Alberni Valley Drag Race Association, we have a letter dated January 22nd, 2020, requesting the use of Stamp Avenue for 2020 and 2021 for the purpose of conducting Thunder in the Valley. And we do have a representative here from the Drag Race Association. The recommendation from staff is to give them the opportunity to bring back a report, just outlining anything that council needs to be aware of beforehand. Councillor Solda?
Madam Mayor, I'll move that the Council for the City of Port Alberni direct staff to research the feasibility of accommodating the request for the AVDRA and provide a subsequent report back to Council.
Second, Madam Mayor.
Okay, and Councillor Haggard.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I was curious when we received this in our package, because last year the Drag Racing Association did not want to use Stamp Avenue because they said it no longer served their purposes and they would lose money on the weekend. So I'm wondering why they decided that would now work for them.
Sure, I'm wondering if we would like to hear from our representative. Yes, come on forward.
We just want to race. You guys just want to race.
We've just looked at all the options out there. Last year we couldn't fit enough cars in there, so now we've laid it out differently that we're going to run the street cars, because the street cars take up so much room, and then with the trailers. So if we condense what's in the mill parking to just the mod cars and the pro cars. Then we can run all the street cars, they can be parked out on from the tracks out to Redford. So we were going to put all them out there, which it works. Like we're trying to, like we're grasping, we don't want to lose our date. I mean, our date's critical, we'll never go out. I mean, we've changed the way we're looking at it now. We obviously have to go to raise some funds because this is what we're looking at. So we're not going to be paying the high buck cars anyways because they always want money, and then we're just going to run just the cars that bring the income in so we can go make some money and try and go forward on building a track. So it will work.
Okay.
Great, thank you. Councillor Haggard again.
When you did your presentation in the regional district, I suggested that you go towards your end goal sooner rather than later.
Oh, we are.
Have you considered looking at community futures for funding or financing instead of?
We've already applied one for the regional district already, and we've already been talking to a couple other groups that we're working at. So, and our goal is to get to there. We're just trying to fine tune what our goal is. We have some options that we've been able to talk with our mayor with, and Tim, and we've also looked some other options. So we just want to get this one here. We'll make it, even though it's a smaller event. We've applied for a grant for getting fencing, so we could put a permanent fencing there, or change that along there, or something. Because that's the fencing is the biggest cost of it all. It's a $10,000 bill for us, and it just comes down to it. So if we put streetcars out on the other side of there and change the way we lay it out, and then we don't have all the parking. So we're just looking at all the options, right? So.
Thank you. Councillor Paulson.
I'm just really pleased to see you guys back in the interim for a couple of years here, and I really think that there's been a changeover in your leadership.
Yep.
And that leadership, I think, is in a great position to move forward. These infrastructure projects are huge, and money is a huge thing, but
yep.
I think if you go about it right, it can be done.
Yep.
And this is a pretty giving community too. So congratulations for keeping the spirit alive.
Yeah, no, I mean, we have taken a whole new look at it. Like, we're not going, I mean, before we just kind of, that's what we've started ahead of time when we sat down with the mayor and ahead of time saying, this is what we're thinking, you know, let's not go backwards every time and back and forth. Our biggest goal for us is to try and get this a date, say that we can do it, then we can start advertising. Because if we get, the longer we have time to advertise, the more money we can make, and the faster we can produce everything and get it go from there. So.
Yeah. And certainly in my conversations with Dave and other drag race members, I can see that they are working very hard to be innovative to make Stamp Avenue work, and you know, where it might not have last year, to find a way to make it work for this year. So, and I'm sure we can do the same on our end.
Might need local business to help with parking.
Well, that was in the mix of it.
That's a future meeting.
Yeah, we're just looking to see if we can get it going. Then we're going to go to fit everything in. I mean, we can make it all work. It's just we just want to get approval from you guys first, and then we'll go our next steps and then go from there.
Thank you. Okay, so the motion has been moved and seconded. All in favor? Carried. Thank you. Okay, and we have two proclamations. The first is from Mitch Gardner. Councillor Corbeil, would you like to read this one?
Yes, Madam Mayor. I'd like to move that February 22nd, 2020 be proclaimed as National Day of Kindness. Probably should be pronounced kindness. In Port Alberni. Note, council, if available, is invited to join Mayor Minions and representatives of the Kinsman Club in the official flag raising scheduled to take place on Thursday, February 20th at 9 a.m. at City Hall.
Perfect.
It further goes on to say that the email dated December 18th, 2019 from Mitch Gardner, Kinsman Club of Port Alberni, requesting that February 22nd, 2020 be proclaimed as National Day of Kindness in Port Alberni be received and the day proclaimed as requested.
Second, Madam Mayor.
Okay, any questions? All in favor? Carried. And item 2 from Heritage BC, an email dated January 21st, 2020, requesting that February 17th to 23rd, 2020 be proclaimed as Heritage Week 2020, bringing the past into the future in Port Alberni. Councillor Washington, would you like to read this one?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. That the email dated January 21, 2020, requesting that February 17 to 23 Be proclaimed as Heritage Week 2020, bringing the past into the future, in Port Alberni be received and the week proclaimed as requested.
Thank you. Is there a seconder?
Second, Madam Mayor.
Any questions? All in favor? Carried. Item J, correspondence for information, City Clerk.
Yes, Madam Mayor, correspondence from the Alberni Valley Museum and Heritage Commission, not really correspondence, but minutes for your information of December 4th, 2019. We have a letter from Minister Rob Fleming reminding of the Premier's Awards for 2020 for Excellence in Education. A deadline to submit nominations is April 30th of this year. Correspondence from Roland Smith was also related to the Mclean Mill and spoke about property uses and the ALC. And then lastly, an email from Leslie Wright about Port Alberni Refugee Sponsorship Committee launching a fundraiser entitled A Leap Across the World, taking place on February 29th, which indicates more information to follow late January, and we're still waiting for that.
Okay, thank you. Are there any questions on it or comments on any of these items? Okay. Councillor Poon, would you like to move receipts?
So moved.
Second, Madam Mayor.
All in favor? Carried. No report from in camera, so on to councillor reports. Any items people would like to highlight from their reports? Councillor Paulson, anything you would like to highlight from your report?
I would like to hear more about your report.
Next time. I'll backdate it. Okay. Oh, Councillor Corbeil.
Well, in my report, I talk a little bit about the truck loggers convention that the mayor and I attended, and a few more takeaways and things that I think are really pertinent to this community. There was a fellow there that did a survey of provincial, federal politics, and also how the forest industry is perceived in British Columbia. And interestingly enough, the 75%, I believe, of people in BC felt that the forest industry and recreation could coexist. And I think about the situation we're in here in the valley, where it's so difficult to actually access backcountry. And I thought, if we want to ensure that we have a vibrant forest industry, hopefully forest companies start to pay attention to things like that. Another thing this fella talked about was only 7% of the respondents said that they would want their friend or child to work in the forest industries. And even though it's well perceived, majority of people in British Columbia think it's one of the most important industries. I think a paltry 7% would actually want to see their child or friend work in the industry, which I thought, again, is pretty telling, and I hope the forest industry wakes up to that fact. And the CEO of Paper Excellence, who owns the paper mill here in town, did a report, and he talked about how 2/3 of the residuals needed for the paper mill have to come from a mill. And we've lost so much allowable cut, and we've seen our wood split up in 10 different directions, that I'm really very concerned about the future of the paper mill unless we can keep more fiber in the community. So it was, all in all, it was a very informative conference, but there were sure some things there that when I heard them, I was very concerned about our own situation here in the valley. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Absolutely. Thank you. Okay. Any other items? Okay. Councillor Soldo, would you like to move receipt of the reports?
Motion to receive the report from the council.
Is there a seconder?
Second, Madam Mayor.
All in favor? Carried. Thank you. And on to item M, new business. Councillor Paulson.
On a more somber note, I would just like to acknowledge the tragedy that happened in Australia with the Coastal Aviation USA, with their 3 staff members there, and acknowledge the work that they're doing in Australia and other places around the world. And it's a dangerous business, but I can't imagine how that affects that whole, I call it family, and that they are a family. The aviation industry is a small industry, and I just want to recognize what they do in the world, but also what they're going through.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely.
thank you.
Thank you for that. And I did reach out on council's behalf to Wayne Coulson as well as Foster, and just extended, our condolences, and offered if there was anything that the city could assist with in the coming weeks to let us know, because I think it'll certainly be a difficult time for them.
We're behind them.
Councillor Solda.
Madam Mayor, I'd like to do a notice of motion regarding borrowing, and I will work with staff on the wording on it for the next meeting. Thank you.
Sure, perfect. Okay, and we have item M1. If we could bring that up. Okay, so the only part that we are looking to approve today is the first part, not the further detail, as we're going to, our staff are going to work through it a bit. But this is a proposed resolution to go forward to AVICC that Councillor Corbeil has brought forward. So it is that council endorse the resolution entitled Working Forest Reserve for submission and consideration at the 2020 AVICC Annual General Meeting and Convention taking place April 15th to 17th, 2020 in Nanaimo, BC. And Councillor Corbeil, I'll just give you an opportunity if you want to briefly speak to it, just recognizing again that the rest of it may is likely going to change or may change, but we're going to be working on that with staff.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Well, as I said regarding fiber supply to the paper mill, that our forest industry has gone through some trying times and continues to go through trying times. And part of the issue, if you think back at TFLs were put in place in the 50s, and licenses were given for 20 or 25 years to ensure that forest companies had some stability to develop harvesting methods, to build manufacturing plants, et cetera, et cetera. And also they need a stable fiber. So my resolution talks about trying to create more fiber for the milling facilities here in the valley, as well as giving forest companies some stability in their the amount of fiber that they can harvest. And we have agricultural land reserves. Could we not have something that appears to be a forestry reserve that once we get through all the ramifications of the old growth strategy that's going on, then we will be able to identify an area that forest companies know that they will have the ability to harvest into the future. And just mentioning I think we've got till the end of January to reply to the survey that's out there on the old growth strategy. And again, if some people had their way, they would put a halt to old growth logging entirely, and the TFL 44 is 70% old growth. So if we were to lose all old growth tomorrow, we would be closing doors in a hurry all over town. So anyways, that's the rationale behind the resolution, that I think our forest companies, our forest industry, the workers need a leg up, and this might provide that. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Poon?
Thank you. I just want to thank Councillor Corbeil for bringing this resolution forward, because I think it's very important that we it's very important that we urge the government to make some changes in how we do things. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. And I think this is very timely given the private managed forest lands review going on, like you said, as well as the old growth review. I certainly am a believer that there are changes needed in the forest industry, but I also believe very strongly in the importance to preserve the working forest. And I think that a concept similar to the agricultural land reserve could make a lot of sense to give that certainty and still look at long-term regulations and approaches to the industry. So I think this is a great concept, and looking forward to bringing it forward at AVICC. So with that, I read it. Councillor Corbeil, would you like to just move that we endorse it for bringing forward.
Yes, Madam Mayor, I'd like to move that the council endorse a resolution entitled Working Force Reserve for submission and consideration at the 2020 AVICC Annual General Meeting and Convention taking place April 15th to 17th, 2020 in Nanaimo, British Columbia.
Thank you. Thank you. Any further comments? Okay, seeing none, all in favor? Carried. Thank you. That brings us to question period, an opportunity for members of the public, of which there are none left. We do have one member of the press, if anyone would like to ask questions. Seeing none, would somebody like to move adjournment? All in favor? Carried.